Okay, good Tavach, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us as we are sponsored by Eddie Chazan, L'Refuah Shalema for Yedidya Ben Penina, Shoshana Bas Penina, and Simone Bas Rachel, by Shelley Zeitlin for his children, Eli Orit and Ora, and for my L'Refuah Shalema, my Shemaya Ben Esther Fadel, and also co-sponsored Lili Nishmas Dav Ben Chaim, L'Refuah Shalema for Yom Moshe Mechai Sar, Yaakov Ben Bas Yaleah, and the Schus of Avram Yom Ben Ishmael Malki Yehudis and family. We welcome here in Adnis Matzoi Shabbos, Shimon Klein, Irving Fishbaum, Rabbi Kranz, Saba, Dr. Black, Yitzi Fuchs, Yaakov Warman, A.B. Spry, Mel Zachter, Nachman Chaplin, Menachem Umansky, Shelley Zeitler, Yisrael Fisher, Barry Cement, Ben Zion Cohn, Ruvain Shannon, Eddie Chazan, Stephen Holtzman, Moshe Lehman, Avram Rezepkowitz, Chaim Braun, Yitzi Muller, Rabbi Kniel, Richard Rosenzweig, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Abe Arbach, and David Helfgott. Here in Shul, holding down the fort, is Barish Gesserman, as we start at the two dots on Tezayin Amid Beis. Two dots on Tezayin Amid Beis, welcoming in Ilya Shutman for our 29th Zoomer of the evening, and here comes our 30th Zoomer of the evening, and we are again starting at the two dots on Tezayin Amid Beis. Achal Tevel u'Meiser Rishon. The question is, if everything was tithed except for the Meiser Ani in the third and the sixth year, is that going to be also Malchus because it's Tevel because the Meiser Ani was not removed? So the Gemara tells us, Amar Rav, Achal Tevel shel Meiser Ani. If everything else was taken, the Truma and the Meiser Rishon and the Trumas Meiser, it was all taken, but the Meiser Ani was not taken, like it gets Malchus. Kaman, like who? Ki hai Tana, like the following Tana. The Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, Amar Rab Yaisi, Yachal lo yeh chayiv elala tevel shelo yihurim mimenu kol iker. I might think that you're only chayiv if it's pure tevel. Tevel is tov loy, it's no good. In other words, you didn't take anything. You didn't take even the Truma Gedayla. Hurim mimenu Truma Gedayla, v'lo yihurim mimenu Meiser Rishon. If you took off the Truma Gedayla, but you didn't give the Meiser Rishon to the Levi, or Meiser Rishon, but in the first, second, fourth, fifth year you didn't give v'lo Meiser Sheni. Or afilu Meiser Ani, if in the third and the sixth year you didn't give the Meiser Ani, minayin that you get Malchus. Talmud Laimar, it says in the pasuk, Lo yisucha lechol b'sharecha, you should not eat in your gates. Ulahalanu aimer v'achlu b'sharecha v'saveyu. And over there by Meiser Ani it says v'achlu b'sharecha v'saveyu, eat in your gates and be satiated. Malahalon Meiser Ani, just like over there where it says b'sharecha, it's referring even to Meiser Ani. Afkan, when it says Lo yisucha lechol b'sharecha, it refers even to Meiser Ani. V'amrachmana, and the Torah says if the Meiser Ani was not removed, Lo yisucha lechol, you're not allowed to eat it. So there's a lav. Amar Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef says it would seem to be ketanoi, that this is a machlokes tanoi. Question is, if a person, as we welcome in Shimon there, if a person bought from an Amma Oretz Demai. Now we know it's a suffix. Now the Meiser Ani, you don't have to give, because once you separate it, then since it's only a question of money, you could say Amaitzi Mechaver al Baraya. Prove that the Amma Oretz didn't already give it to the poor. So it's a suffix. So I'll say suffix you don't have to give. The question is, do you have to separate it as Meiser Ani and then not give it? So Rabbi Lazar ain't tzarich likros Hashem al Meiser Ani shel Dmai. You don't even have to separate it and call it Meiser Ani. The Chacham say kairei es Hashem. You declare it Meiser Ani, but then ve'ein tzarich lahafresh. You don't have to separate it and give it to him because it's hamoitz mechaver al varaya. So my lab b'hakam ifligi. The Marsavar, the one that says that you have to be Korishain, Vadai Tovlai, where it's definite, it makes it Tevel until you separate. And therefore, in the case of Suffolk, in order that it shouldn't be Tevel, you do have to separate it. Marsavar Vadai Eina Tovlai. In the case of definite, it doesn't make it Tevel, and therefore over here, where you don't have to give it, you don't even have to separate it. Amalei Abayas says that can't be what the machlokes is. Because why do they argue in a case of a demai, of suffix, lichtlik bevadai? They should argue in a case of definite if he gets malchus, if he doesn't separate it. Ela de Kuli Alma, and welcome Michal Avram as we are holding on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top, 17a, 5 lines from the top. Ela de Kuli Alma Vadai Tovlei. For sure, if it's in the 3rd and the 6th year and Eddie does not separate the Meiser Sheni, the Meiser Ani, he gets whacked, he gets malchus. It's definitely Tevel. However, here the question is whether by an Amma Oretz, do we say that the Amma Oretz doesn't separate the Mai? Doesn't separate Meiser Ani. Since once he separates it, it takes away the Isser of Tevel, then we say he'll definitely separate it. Why not? He doesn't want it. The rest is only stealing. Stealing he doesn't mind, but he doesn't want to get the more serious Isser of eating Tevel. Why? Once they separate it, then it's only stealing. They're going to separate it in order to take away the Isser of Tevel. The Rabbanan say, since it's a bother, they don't separate it, and therefore you have to separate it. Now here we have a machlokes. How much do you have to eat from the tevel in order to get malchus? So of course the simple answer is we know that all over Shas, in order for it to be considered an achila, you have to eat a kazayis. You have to eat the amount of a kazayis. Reb Shimon says even a minuscule amount. So the Gemara says, what's the reason of Reb Shimon? Now it's an interesting discussion. Amar Rabbi Vay, Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish, machlokes bechita. According to Reb Shimon, if it's one kernel of wheat, so Reb Shimon says even if it's less than a kazayis, you're chayiv, because a kernel of wheat, like an ant, is considered a bria, right? And it's considered a creation, and it has its own identity. Aval bekemach, but if it's flour, if it's ground into flour, that's definitely not a bria. Divrei hakol kazayis. Even Reb Shimon agrees that it's a kazayis. Reb Yirmiyah, Reb Shimon Lakish. Reb Yirmiyah says in the name Reb Shimon Lakish, k'machlokes bezu. Just like Reb Shimon holds your chayiv for less than a kazayis, if it's a kernel, kach machlokes bezu. He holds it's less than your chayiv for less than a kazayis, even if it's ground into flour. Because the reason of Reb Shimon is not because of beria. The reason is because he holds that the din of kazayis is halacha l'moshe misinai, which is said only in the case of eating chaylev or dam b'shoigeg to be chayiv achatas. So there, to be chayiv achatas, you have to have the share of a kazayis. But for malchus, it's even less than a kazayis. So the Gemara says, well, it seems to be from our Mishnah that the reason is because of a bria, as we welcome in Michal for our 32nd Zoomer of the evening. Says the Gemara, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Amalem Reb Shimon, Iatem moidimli. Don't you admit with me, ba'eichel nemala kol shu chayiv? Don't you agree with me that if you eat an ant, you're chayiv? Amalei, so the rabbis say, an ant is different because it's a creature. It's a creature, and creature has its own identity, even if it's less than a kazayis. Amalahen, so he counted afchita achas kibriyasa. So also a kernel of a wheat is considered like a creature. That would seem to imply, but only a kernel of wheat, chita in kemach loy. So the Gemara says, no, he's just playing, so to speak, devil's advocate. The divrayim kamer, according to you at least, admit to me a kernel of wheat. Lididi afilu kemach nami, according to me, even flour, because I hold that the din of kazayis was only said by the chatas by eating chaylev and dam. El lididchu, but according to you, admit to me that a kernel of wheat also has its own identity. V'Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan counter, it's only a bria if it's an animate object. Brias neshama chashuva, that which has a neshama, like an ant, that's chashuv. Chita, even though it's the way it was created, but it doesn't have a neshama, loy chashuva. Tanya Kavasi de Rabbi Yirmiyah, We have a raya like Rabbi Yirmiyah that Rabbi Shimon argues even by flour. Rabbi Shimon Omer kol shul malchus. For malchus, it's always the amount of a minuscule amount, even if it's flour. Lo amru kazayis elalinian carbon. He only said kazayis regarding eating chaylev or dam. Less than a kazayis, you're chayev a chatas. But if it's less than a kazayis, you're not chayev a chatas. But le'inyan malchus, you're chayev no matter what, even if it's kosher. Now, just getting underway over here on a beautiful Motzei Shabbos with such a beautiful olam. Let me start reminding everybody. I don't want somebody to say, I didn't know, I didn't hear, he didn't tell me, nobody said so. Tomorrow is my son Yaakov is making a bar mitzvah for his Bechar Aaron Tzvi, and I couldn't figure out, since the bar mitzvah is starting at 7, I would have had to make the shir at 10:30. So instead of doing that, we're having a shir, one time only, shir at 5:30 tomorrow afternoon. Shir tomorrow is at 5:30. That seems to be the consensus of opinion. 5:30 tomorrow. Those that are here could come down to the shul. I'm saying the shir in the shul at 5:30.
Does the Rav know if the Mishnayos will be before or after?
After.
Okay.
And Friday's Mishnayos, by the way, I just put on right after Shabbos. I didn't get it very rare time. I think it's the first time since Brachas. I didn't say the shir on the day. I said it right after Shabbos. So Friday's Mishnayos is already on the systems. Says the Mishnah, Ha'oichel bikurim. Here's a continuation of things where you get malchus. If Eddie eats bikurim, actually kara aleim, even a kohen who eats the first fruits before saying the formula that you're supposed to say on the first fruits, you get malchus. Kache kachim chutz l'klam, if you eat kache kachim like a chatas, like an osham, like a mincha outside of the azara, kachim kalim or maisa sheni, if you eat kachim kalim, minor kachim like a bechar, maisa behema, shlamim, toida, or maisa sheni, the second tithe, chutz l'chayma, outside of the walls of the old city. Hashavir es etzim b'pesach hatar, if somebody breaks a bone in a good carbon pesach, because it says etzem lo yisish berubay, you should not break a bone, but that's only if the pesach is tar. Harizeh loike arba'im, you get malchus. Aval hamoiser b'tar, but if you leave over a carbon past the morning, v'ashaver b'tamei, or if you break a bone in a pesach that was tamei, because it says etzem lo yisish berubay, only in a kosher pesach, eino loike arba'im. And the reason why you don't get malchus for leaving it over past the morning, even though it says is because it's a lavanita glase. You could correct it by burning it afterwards in fire. Hanoitel eim alabonim. If a person takes the bird off its eggs or off its chicks, takes the mother. Torah says you're not supposed to take the mother off the chicks. But now it says over there, you're not allowed to take it, and it says shalach to shalach. Now the question is, shalach to shalach a way to repair the taking of the mother, or does it mean rather you send it away before you take it? So Rabbi Yehuda says once you take the mother, lo kevein mishalech, you get malchus, and now you don't send it away because you're supposed to send it away rather than taking it. Once you take it, it's farfallen. The Chacham no, it means if you take it away, you should send it away afterwards, and then you could correct the prohibition. Mishalech ve'ein like you send it away and you get malchus. And ze'aklau. This is the general principle. Kol mitzvahs loisasei sheyesh bo kumasei. Any prohibit negative commandment that has a way to which is followed by a positive command to correct it, ein chayavin aleh, you don't get malchus. Now, this din that if you don't say the formula and the kohen eats it before the formula is said on bikurim, this malchus, that's not a universal opinion. That's not unanimous. Amar Rabba Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan zu divrei Rabbi Kiva stimta. This is the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Many stam anonymous mishnas and shas go according to Rabbi Kiva. Aval chachamim aimim bikurim hanocha ma'keves b'hem. It has to be placed in front of the mizbeach, but once it's placed in front of the mizbeach, kriya eina ma'keves b'hem. The formula is not ma'akev, and therefore, if you didn't say the formula, you wouldn't get malchus. Says the Gemara, but that's not only the opinion of Reb Kiva, it's also the opinion of Reb Shimon. V'lei mazu divrei Reb Shimon stimta. Reb Shimon holds that the kriya is not ma'akev. It says the Gemara, you're right. But Hakamashman, the Rabbi Akiva, Reb Shimon's real life. By saying it's Rabbi Akiva's stimta, we're saying that Rabbi Akiva holds like Reb Shimon. So the Gemara says, my Reb Shimon, where do we see? And now the Gemara is going to give us a whole adventure, a whole lengthy teaching of Reb Shimon's, which will earn him tremendous respect on how he dissects a pasuk and darshans brilliantly. It's not my askama, he doesn't need my askama, brilliantly every piece of the pasuk. My Reb Shimon, where will we find that Reb Shimon holds that the formula of the bikurim is not ma'akiv, and there's no malchus if you have the bikurim, the kohen eats the bikurim before the formula. The Tanya, it says at the end of the pasuk, usrumas yodecha, and the offering of your hand, elu bikurim. This is a reference that you're not supposed to eat bikurim in a certain situation. Reb Shimon, so when we say Srumas Yadecha comes to include the bikurim, ma bozel l'lamdeinu. What does this come to teach us? Im lo'ichlon chutz l'chayma, if it's to tell us that you can't eat the bikurim outside of the old city, that's obvious. Kal v'chaymer m'maiser akal. It's a kal v'chaymer from Ma'aser Sheni, which is more lenient. We'll see Ma'aser Sheni is more lenient because it could be eaten by non-Kohanim. Oma Ma'aser Akal, Oichlon Chutz L'chayim Aloike, if you eat it outside of the walls of the old city, you get Malchus, Bikurim, first fruits which are not permitted to be eaten by non-Kohanim, like Kol Shechet. So why does it say Trumas Yadecha? Loi Ba'akasav Eloichel Bikurim, Ad She'loi Kara Aleim Shu Loike. It's coming to tell us that if you eat bikurim before you do kriya, you get malchus. I'm sorry, I said the other way around. But this is Reb Shimon. That's what we're saying. That our Mishnah is Reb Shimon. It could have been Reb Shimon because our Mishnah says that if you eat it without the kriya, without the formula, you get malchus. And he learns that out from the words usrumas yodecha. Now the pasuk also says v'nidvoisecha, your free will offerings, zu toida v'shlam. That's the Thanksgiving offering and the peace offering, which are types of kachim kalim, of lesser holy karbanos. Reb Shimon, ma ba'zelom lavimdeinu. What prohibition does this pasuk come to teach us? Im loichlon chutz l'chayma. If it's to tell you that you get malchus for eating the toida and the shlamim outside of the old city, kal v'chamim m'maiser. That's a kavacham ma'aser. Ma'aser you chayav if you eat it outside the walled city, even though it's mutter for zarim. It's mutter to be eaten. Now the truth of the matter is taida and shlamim, parts of them can also be eaten by a non-kohen, but parts of the taida and shlamim cannot be eaten by a non-kohen. So it's more chomer than meiser. So therefore, what do we learn? What do we learn from it? Im lefnei zrika. Excuse me, I jumped ahead. We know that in order for the meat of a carbon to be permitted, first the blood has to be sprinkled on the altar. And here we learn out from Nidvei Secha that if you eat from the Taidu Shlamim before the blood is sprinkled, you're going to get malchus. Then the pasuk says, "Uv'chayrais," firstborn, ze'abachar. Now what is that coming to include? If to tell you if you eat it outside of the walled city, kavachayim can only be eaten by a kohen. That a kavachayim for ma'aser, which could be eaten even by a non-kohen. Im lifnei zrika, If it's before Zrika, to tell you to get Malkus if you eat the Bechar before the Zrika Sadam, that's Kal V'Chayim B'Toid V'Shlamim. Now the Kal V'Chayim B'Toid V'Shlamim is that Toid V'Shlamim is not Kodesh Merekan. It's not holy from its mother's womb, while the Bechar is holy from the mother's womb. It's coming to tell you that if a non-Kayin eats from the Bechar even after the blood is sprinkled, she'll like it, that he gets Malkus. Now the pasuk then says, "Bikarcha v'tzaynecha," your cattle and your sheep or your flock, zu chatras v'ashim. That comes to include the sin offering and the guilt offering. Now these are kachim, which can only be eaten inside the azara. What does this come to teach us? If to eat them outside of the walled city, Ashim and Chatas can only be eaten by Kahanim. By the way, they could only be eaten by male Kahanim. If before to eat it before the Zrika Zadam, Kal V'Chayim B'Toid V'Shlamim. It's a Kal V'Chayim B'Toid V'Shlamim. Toid V'Shlamim could be eaten outside of the Azara, while Ashim and Chatas can only be eaten inside the Azara. It's definitely Chayiv Malkus if you eat it before Zrika. Im la'achar Zrika, and if after Zrika, if you eat, a non-Kain eats it after the blood is sprinkled, Kal V'Chayim and Bechar. The Bechar could be eaten by all Kohanim, while the Chatas and the Ashim could only be eaten by males. If you eat Chatas and Ashim outside of the Azara, even Kohanim, she'll like it, that is Malkus. And then finally the pasuk says, Nidarecha zu oila. That's a burnt offering. A burnt offering is smoked up entirely on the Mizbeach. It can't be eaten by anyone. What does that come to teach us? If it tells you get Malkus outside of the old city, Ma'aser is permitted even to a non-Kain. Which is allowed to be eaten while oil is not allowed to be eaten. If to eat after Zrika, which also can be eaten while the oil can't be eaten. If outside of the Azara, at least can be eaten, the oil can't be eaten. The fact that it says Nidarecha comes to tell us a new lie. That even if you eat the oila inside the Azara after Zrika, there's still Malkus, because you're not allowed to eat the oila. It has to go entirely on the Mizbeach. Even inside, she'll like it.
All these things he's learning, are this from the Torah that he has? Because otherwise, how would you know this is what it's coming to teach you?
It's the next step. In other words, he knows the features of each one. And now that we have this added feature, is this other? So we have an extra pasuk, so it fits into the next feature of this.
Okay, so it's a logical.
It's a logical.
That this is the next feature.
That's correct. That's correct. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Ain't no Shimon Hadin.
The Gemara is going to ask that. We'll see. Amar Rava, so here Rava gives an amazing, and it's not often that you hear this. Amar Rava dialida ime kireb Shimon tiyaled. If somebody could have a child like Reb Shimon, it's kedai to give birth. V'iloi loi tiyaled. I mean, this is the way to have a child like Reb Shimon. But now he gives criticism. V'afal gav the islu pircha. Even though all of these arguments of Reb Shimon have a refutation alongside it. We said that Bikurim is more chomer than Meiser. My chomer to Bikurim Meiser, shekein asurim lazarim, because Bikurim is also to a non-kain, while Meiser is permitted to a non-kain. Well, adarabba. Meiser is more chomer than Bikurim, shekein also la'oinen. A Meiser sheni can't be eaten by somebody who just lost a relative, lo yaleinu. It says in Vida Meiser, lo yachalti ba'oini mimenu, while Bikurim can be eaten by an oinen. And progressing further. Umay chumra the taida v'shlamim meiser. What's the chumra of taida and shlamim over meiser? Shekain tunin matan damen v'emurim l'gabei mizbeach. That taida and shlamim need its blood and its sacrificial pieces to be put on the mizbeach, while meiser doesn't have anything on the mizbeach. Adarabba meiser chamer, because in order to redeem it, you could only redeem meiser while you could redeem taida, and if it has a mum, you could redeem taida and shlamim with any shava kesef. Meiser could only be redeemed with a coin that has a mint on it. Shekain tunin kesef tzura, because the pasuk says v'tzarta kesef yodecha. You need a coin that has an image on it. Omay chumra de bechar mitayda v'shlamim. What's the chumra of bechar over taida and shlamim? Shekain kedushas merechem, because the bechar is kaddish from its mother's womb. Adarabba taida v'shlamim chamurim. Shekain tunin smicho nesachim v'tunin v'schaza v'shaik. The taida and shlamim need you to lean on the animal with all your might between the horns, and it needs libations, and it needs the waving of the breast and the shank, while Bechar doesn't have all of these things. And my chumrah the chatas v'ashim Bechar, what's the chumrah of a sin offering, a guilt offering over Bechar? Shekain kache kachim, because chatas and ashim is kache kachim, while Bechar is kachim kalam. Adarabba Bechar chamer, because it's kaddish merechem, it's holy from the womb. Shekain kedushas merechem. And what's the chumrah of oila over a sin offering and guilt offering? Because it's offered up totally to Hashem. Sheken kalil adarabba chatas v'ashim chamire, because it has its the feature that it offers specific kapara. Sheken mechaprei. And v'kulu chamire ma'oila, and all of them have an aspect that they're more severe than a burnt offering. Why? The isbu shtei achilas, because all the other ones have two consumptions: the human consumption and consumption on the altar. So it has two mitzvahs, because the mitzvah of human consumption is a mitzvah achloi sam asher kupar behem. The achila is actually kapara. So the other ones have two achilas, while the oila only has one achila on the mizbeach, only one consumption. The kulu chamire ma'oila, the isbu shtei achilas. So the Gemara says, well, if you have a refutation on every single thing that Reb Shimon says, Elamai the Yalidei Imeker Reb Shimon, why were you so motivated to say that a person should give birth to someone like Reb Shimon? So here the Gemara essentially says what Berish asks. Delamai de Svirale, according to his opinion, that each one is more severe than the next, misarisle lekra v'darishle. He starts from the end of the pasuk, Trumas Yodcha, and goes backwards and explains it, because he's building up a system according to each one's laws. In other words, well we have Meiser, and Bikurim is more severe than Meiser. So what must it be coming to tell you? It must be coming to tell you that Bikurim is Aser until you do the Kriya. And then we go to the next one. Then we go to Taida Shlamim. And it comes to tell you that if you eat it outside of the Chayma, you're Chayim. Then we come to the next one, where it comes to tell you that if you eat it before the Zrika, you're Chayim. It comes to the next one. And in other words, we're developing each one. It's not necessary for this, so therefore it's for the next the next stage of this particular item. What's the next stage? And he does it in the strategic way, where he builds up with all the information that we have before that, the next stage, to show what the next novelty is for each one. So now the Gemara asks Dr. Block's kasha. We say that you get malchus, but do you learn how to lav from a kal v'chayma? Even if you hold that we give a penalty, but we don't introduce a new prohibition from a Kal V'chaimer. So first the Gemara suggests, you're right. Reb Shimon is just saying that you're over an Isser, not that you get Malchus. Isur ba'alma, says the Gemara, but that's not true. V'amar Rava says, Zar she'achol min ha'oila l'fnei zrika, a zar that eats from a burnt offering before the Zrikas Adam, chutz l'chaima, outside of the old city, l'Reb Shimon loike chamesh. According to Reb Shimon, he gets 5 malchuses. Now, if we look at Rashi, Rashi itemizes what's the 5 malchuses. So look at Rashi, 5 lines into the wide lines in Rashi. Zar she'achol min ha'oila, dafka zar kamer. It means not a, because actually a kayin is also not allowed to eat an oila. It's supposed to all go on the mizbeach. The kain is also strange to an oila. He's not allowed to eat it either. Hachazar dafka kamer. It means a non-kain. The e kain, because if it's a kain batzalei chalav, then we wouldn't have 5 malchus. We would only have 4. The hachamesh the kamer chadhu mishum chutz l'chayma. One is because you ate it outside the walled city. Dasi b'kal v'chaymer m'maiser. Maiser you're not allowed to eat outside of the walled city. So the oila, which is kol on the mizbech, is surely not allowed to eat outside the walled city. V'chad mishum l'fnei zrika. One is you ate it before the sprinkling of your blood. Dasi b'kal v'chaymer b'tayda v'shlamim. Oila is more severe than tayda and shlamim because it's a kachay kachim. V'chad mishum zor gomer. And one is because he's a non-kain. Afilu la'acha zrika, a non-kain who eats it even after the zrika. Dasi b'kal v'chaymer b'bechar. A bechar is also to a non-kain after zrika, even though it's kachim kalim. So oila, which is kachim, is surely aser. Because shechen l'fnei zrika, and for sure if you eat it before the zrika. V'chad mishum oichel chutz l'klayim, and one is because you ate it outside of the azara. Right? Dasi b'kal v'chaymer mechatas v'ashim. Mechatas v'ashim is not entirely on the mizbeach, but since it's kachim, it can't be eaten outside of the azar. So oila, which is supposed to be all on the mizbeach, surely can be eaten outside of the azar. B'chad mishum oichel oila v'afilu kain, and one is because eating an oila, which is supposed to go on the mizbeach, even if you're a kain or b'seich haklayim, v'kol shechen, and for sure zar chutz l'klayim v'chutz l'chayim. Alma like a chamesh. So you see that there's 5 malchus, not just 5 isurim. But we don't learn out a lav, as Dr. Black said, from a Kal V'chaimer. Says the Gemara, no, he doesn't mean 5 malchuses, he means kamisha isurim. Says the Gemara, but that's not what our Mishnah says. V'anan tanan elu hein aloikin. It says the following get flogged, and it includes some of these lavim. So you see that they're counted in actually those that are flogged. Now we're just going to pause a minute to change over the channel.